Welcome to Podcast Them Down. I'm Tim Regan from U.S. power metal band Burning Shadows, Fade to Black Metallica tribute, dual-violin folk metal band ISENMOR, and recently vacated Graves true zombie metal. Be sure to subscribe, like, or follow. And now, on with the show. Today I'm joined by Mike Wilson from ISENMOR and recently vacated Graves true zombie metal. We're going to talk about backing tracks, which is something that I'm sure you could go on at length about.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Absolutely. All right, yeah. So, the interesting introduction I think that I had into this whole space was frankly when you asked me to join RVG. So that was so for I guess for context for everybody, one of the RVG has no drummer, has no drums or no drummer, just has backing track drums and backing tracks all over the place. So one of the traditional problems with RVG was actually being able to hear yourself live. So we got up on stage and Tim and Ari, who was in the band at the time, they had gotten this in-ear setup, and I think it was just like one transmitter and four receivers. So we all had one mix, and we all had just the same, everybody heard exactly the same stuff, including the backing tracks. But you couldn't really adjust it on the fly. There was a lot of stuff that we couldn't do, and I distinctly recall one show where it's like my earpiece popped out, and I was listening to it. I was like, oh God.
That was like the giant leap forward, because before that we used a Discman, like a literal CD player. Mm-hmm. And so I'd burn the drums and synth onto a disc, and you had to just do it with stage sound. So all the songs had a count off on the hi-hat. Right. And on the first tour, like I got so good at timing the banter, because you knew what the CD was. You just hit play and it just went. So I knew all the gaps, and you could fill them perfectly. And right before the hi-hat came in. So one big problem with that was you had to be able to hear the drums, or else everything was screwed. And at one point, we did move to MP3 players because that became a thing. And there was one show we did where I had some kind of like Apple laptop. Like, this was before Apple, had the iPod and really got their stuff together. Again, and so during the show it overheated. And so the drums just stopped. So I think after that, so we went back to the MP3 player after that. And then that's around the time you came in, and we had just got this inner thing. So for RVG, it was, backing tracks are mandatory. There's no drummer. People have said, you'd be great if you had a drummer. I've heard that before.
Right.
I'm like, we wouldn't exist if we had a drummer.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that was not only my introduction to gigging in general, because I'd never gigged before that. I played my first show at like 28 years old. Like, I think most people start gigging when they're young and stupid, and they're too young to feel shame. And I started gigging when I was older and past the point where I cared about feeling shame. I had been teaching a class around the same time, and I think when you asked me around the same time, I had done a few classes, and I was like, well, if I'm teaching in front of 30 kids that all think I'm an idiot all the time, it's worth it just kind of rolling the dice and seeing what people think of me on stage. So, yeah, so yeah, we played a few shows, and, hearing the drums, even with the in-ears, was kind of an issue. And we played a few more shows like this after, after these few gigs that we played. And then at some point, I became, for some reason, ridiculously fascinated by the gearing aspect of this, because it's like, I'm a software engineer. It's like one big integration problem, right? Like, I know I can't help myself, but and to leave the in-ear monitoring piece itself for another time, because I went crazy with that. But we went through a bunch of iterations where we actually built a box, and I remember like the Brain 1.0 was our initial foray into this, where it was an in-ear box that was driven by a laptop, and and it had a few just XLR tails, and they weren't long enough. They were short, which is fine, but we've since learned that sound guys don't like that. And then even the sound guys that do like that can't necessarily, at least the shows that we play, can't necessarily work with it as much as we'd like. But that being said, we had the Brain 1.0 driven by a laptop. I think the first Brain had like this awkward clicking sound in the. Do you remember this? We would play these shows and there'd just be like this. It wasn't the click track. It was just there was something wrong with the audio interface or the driver or something. So everybody heard all of our just like crazy drums, and then
I do remember that now.
Yeah, because we played one show in Delaware where the guy really knew how to deal with direct input, just DIs in general, and he got us rolling. And then all I could hear was the sound system playing that fucking click.
What a weird sentence. So for RVG, it's mandatory to have these backing tracks. It's the band depends on it, but there's a lot of hate for backing tracks, and yeah. I know you want to get into more of the technical details.
Oh yeah.
But just in case people aren't aware, like it's kind of like auto-tune. I think is when you're using backing tracks well, no one can tell. Right. And then, but then if if it's becoming a crutch, then, maybe that's when people get mad. I feel like people are irrationally mad at backing tracks, in general. So like, I think Delane didn't have a bassist or a keyboardist or something for one of their tours. And so they just put it on backing tracks. And unless you were paying attention, it's like, hey, there's no bassist or, whatever it was.
I'm hearing the bass, but where's I think Animals as Leaders does the same thing, because they don't have, they're a 3-man band, 2 guitarists and a drummer, but they have extended range guitars, but I'm pretty sure you're still hearing a bass track when you see them live.
Yeah, and sometimes bands get blatant with it, and the best example I think is Winter Sun. They don't even count off because they can all hear the count off.
Right.
So they just start songs, and if you're just a casual fan and you don't care about backing tracks, I feel like even at that point, you got to go, that was kind of weird. How did they all do that?
Right. Yeah. And there are a lot of things I'd say in general, especially with metal, that there's a lot of gear that would make our lives easier between both RVG and ISENMOR, because both bands have monitoring issues. RVG, because it relies on the backing tracks entirely, and then ISENMOR because there's 7 people in the band, and some of the members have no frets on their violins, and they need to be able to intonate properly. But yeah, Pshaw playing the right. I do remember. Maybe I'll say that story. The one show where our in-ear rig broke down
Was that
And
the Indiana show?
yeah,
Yeah.
where it's one of those where everybody, you get a recording somehow, somebody records it, or we put up a camera or something to film the show. So I think I played back like 5 minutes of it, listening to the violins and the vocals, because nobody could hear themselves, because this was like a basement.
Right.
And I was like, I can't do it anymore. I gotta turn this off. But yeah, like E drums would be great for us, but you can't use those live.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
Unless you're like Quiet Riot or you go in for an 80s feel, you might be able to get with those hex pads.
Right. No one wants I know Dave has pushed for it before, because it's also easier to move an E kit.
Oh yeah. It's like easier for it's easier almost in its entirety, but
yeah, the lines that people get mad when bands cross are so completely arbitrary, but E drums is like the big one. If you showed up to a metal show with an E kit, everyone's like,
despite the fact that everybody triggers anyway, you come up with a real.
Oh no! You can trigger an acoustic kit. That's okay.
Yeah. You get the worst of both worlds. You set up the whole acoustic kit and disregard the sounds entirely. Dude, I saw Gorguts live, and they've got these two tiny little bass drums, and it's like, and they don't care. Gorguts is good enough that they this isn't something that they're concerned about, but two tiny little bass drums, and then finally, when they're doing the sound check, they hit it, and it's just boom. It's like, yeah, it's a fucking trigger.
You got like you saw the videos of Mike Portnoy playing songs in the Hello Kitty set. Mm-hmm. That's what you need.
And there you
Dave
go.
needs. He needs the Hello Kitty thing with triggers, and then all the problems are solved. You got a real drum kit.
There you go. I wonder if you could get around it. I wonder if you just had a whole E kit and then a triggered kick, so you actually had like the big. Like, would people notice as much? Probably, maybe not.
Yeah, who knows? That's a good question. So the poor man's backing tracks, and Burning Shadows did try this. I don't think we ever went with it live, but that same MP3 player that played the drums, at one point what I had done is made one track that's click, mm-hmm. and one track that's whatever the backing track was. And for Burning Shadows, it was background vocals and synth. And because, when Greg left, suddenly I had to do all these background vocals. And I was didn't want to have to practice.
Right.
So then the problem becomes the drummer has to listen to the click, and if there's like a tempo change or something, they have to let everyone else know. And that's actually how a certain recently disgraced American power metal band did things. Yeah, if you watch some of the DVDs, or I guess it's not okay to watch them anymore. But so if you remember back to some of the DVDs, you can hear the drummer, let's call him Brett Snedley, like smacking the hi-hat to keep time whenever there's a tempo change. And it's because the backing track has changed tempos.
Interesting.
And it's too late now, but if you had the chance to listen to the bootleg Vengeance in Gothenburg, they had all the backing tracks cranked way too high, so you knew exactly what was on them. And it was mostly backing vocals and synth, just like like what we were doing in Burning Shadows, because those are the two things that most metal bands need some help with.
No, we played with the first show that ISENMOR played. Do you remember that they were almost like a pop? They weren't pop, like alternative metal. It was the headliner band. It was like Sun and Flame or Sun and Flesh. You know what I'm talking about?
This sounds vaguely familiar. My memory is totally shot. So it's a good thing we're recording this.
Right. No, they were really good though. I really enjoyed them, but I noticed the drummer had in-ears, and I asked him, so they had a, like an MP3 player with a Y splitter. One was the click, and one was the backing tracks, and that's how they did things. So it's not uncommon.
Yeah. So that was the attempt we did.
Right.
But things have gotten so much better now. So
yeah. So I guess to get back more to the tech stuff, RBG had various iterations of trying to cobble the stuff together, and then I went insane, and I was like, I want to put together something that like we're not going to have any issues with. So
how'd that work?
I will say the foundation is good. It's just there's a lot of user error, and it's gotten better as I've ironed that out. So I built this ridiculous in-ear box, and at the heart of it for backing tracks, I have this Cymatic U-Track 24, and it's just a backing track player / recorder. You can do either one with it, but we only use it for playing backing tracks. But I got to the point where I got afraid of having the computer as the brain, because I had the computer actually doing the backing track driving, and because we ran into more than one occasion where something wonky happened with the computer. Like I remember I opened up the computer once at a gig, and I was like, okay, let's go on, and then it just started doing updates, and I'm like, no. So I've in general tried to step way far away from laptops and more towards dedicated hardware, just because now I mean, if something goes wrong with the dedicated hardware, you're really fucked. There's not a whole lot you can do. But the only problems I've had with this backing track player live have been my own. Like it's been because I fucked something up. I've never. I guess there is one thing that I can think of, but we'll get to that later. But the cool thing about the Cymatic, RVG tours in various formations, sometimes with or without a bassist, sometimes with or without a second guitarist.
Now we have two bassists.
Yeah, or two bassists. So the U-Track 24 can output 24 tracks. So I basically have this. I have this going into a Whirlwind AB8 and then out to a splitter.
All right, what's the AB8?
The AB8, you can, it's an 8-track AB device. So basically, for any of the 8 tracks that go into it, I can say use track. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess technically it takes in 16 tracks, but then you can choose like one from each pair. So I can say like
use, switch between the backing track.
Yes.
Or like, let's say the bassist or the third guitarist is there.
Yes.
You can use the third guitarist's input.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully I remember to switch him on when he's there. And maybe we'll notice. So
by the way, Amp Sims is another episode.
Oh, okay. Well, that's...
Actually, it's probably a series.
All right, yeah. So basically, we have this, got rid of the laptop, just have this U-Track 24 going into an AB switcher, going into a split out. It's like that, and trying to make as much of the path to the front of house analog as possible, so that if something goes wrong, they can still get most of what we're doing. So, with RVG. Well, so interestingly, I think about when I built this, I think RVG was on kind of an extended hiatus, or at least we weren't gigging anywhere near as much. So most of this we did for ISENMOR. And because ISENMOR has 7 members, we need a click badly. Because it's just trying to trying to keep track of the song when you're playing like basements and small bars and stuff like that, which have no monitoring situation, and like I said earlier, the violins, these people really need to hear themselves. We need something to at least lock us down, so we have a click, and that's part of the backing tracks. The nice thing about the U track is that you can do the click and then stereo backing out, as opposed to having like a mono out and a mono click. If you were to just use something like an MP3 player. Sorry if I'm getting too into the geeky weeds here, but the long and short of it is that for ISENMOR, this was really able to, the click alone was able to lock us down, which helped out a ton. And then for the types of stuff that we end up putting on backing tracks in ISENMOR, we're a lot more reserved, I think, than RVG. So we have a song Saxon Shore, and Saxon Shore has this epic chorus where I think we recorded 3 or 4 tracks of each of us. So there are 4 primary clean vocalists in the band, right? So it's like a 12. Yeah, it's like a 12 track.
Yeah, so it's bringing 12 people along.
Yeah. So when we do it live, for one, it's a harmony, and it's not a particularly easy harmony. And then for 2, we're not 12 people. we're 4. So we do the backing tracks for that because it just makes it sound way, way better. And then I'm trying to think of a few. We added in a few other things more recently. Basically just to boost choruses and things like that. But it's mostly just to keep things sounding more epic. So if for some reason the backing tracks don't work in ISENMOR, we're not totally hosed. We can always play a show. But with the backing tracks, we sound like way, 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 way better, I think.
Well, that's I'm insulted by how many ways you put on there.
Okay, way, way, way better.
That's all right. I'll live with that.
It's more in the vein of, that's more realistic.
So one problem, whether it's actually a problem or not, could be debated. But one issue would be people. So you have a recording and you're playing to the recording. So that means every single show is the exact same tempo.
Right.
And you can't really improvise around that, or, if you... dead air. This is bad.
No, so interestingly, you could potentially do some improvisation, but you'd have to do it in a really inorganic way.
Right. It's not really, you can't be spontaneous. That's what I was trying to get at. And people say that takes away from the performance, but there's no free lunch. Like, do you want the epic choruses and don't want to hire a choir? Right. Well, the cost of that is every show is going to be the same tempo, and hopefully you got that tempo right. But there are advantages to that, I think. So for RVG, for example, if you video all the shows like we did on the tour, you can splice them all together very easily because you don't have to deal with different tempos between shows. And a chronic problem that has happened in all the bands I've ever been in, except for RVG, is, you could get real excited for a show and you got adrenaline going and you start playing 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Yep.
And I have plenty of examples of this. Like if there's a song we're playing and it just cuts to some rhythm part I have to do, and I'll do it way too fast. But on stage, it it feels like the right tempo. But then you go and listen to it and you're going like, why am I playing so sloppy? Like I was able to do this, oh, it's because I'm doing it 30% faster, So, so backing tracks do help with that. And I don't know if they want me sharing this, but Division, when I was in Division, the drummer at the time, I had a tendency to rush. So he played to a click. He had an iPod with all the clicks, but there were no backing tracks. So all the shows were the right tempo, but because the drummer was playing to a click.
Yeah, I frankly have no. I mean, obviously, I'm in a bunch of bands that use clicks. I have no problems with bands using clicks. So ISENMOR pre-click was sloppy, like quite sloppy, and we and our monitoring situation in general was pretty. When it was poor, ISENMOR did not play very well. So I felt super epic when we were writing, and then we'd play shows and be like, we fucking suck.
Wow.
Yeah, and so then when we got the monitoring figured out, and then we got the backing tracks and clicks and all that stuff. I mean, we've gotten really, really nice comments about our stage shows. I mean, we've had a few things here and there that didn't go wonderfully. I know I'm being a little cocky here, but
cocky is what they called me in high school. Never mind.
There was one show we played at the Depot where I don't remember the other band's name. I really liked them though. It was shit. Did they have like a music video on stage? Am I thinking? You know what I'm talking about?
It was two people.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Oh man, I was just looking. Bastion's Wake.
Yeah, I really liked them. Like they were quite good.
Don't get mad that we didn't remember that right away. I'm sorry.
No, they were really fantastic, and I'm watching them like, man, they're good. And then one of the members after the show, she said, it's like, I hate how good you are, and that was like the best compliment I've ever received. And it's like, I know part of it is the fact that we're tighter than maybe we should be because we have backing tracks and things like that to help us keep it together. But it does result in a better product, despite the fact that maybe it's perceived by some to be cheating. But that's I don't care. I don't care about that. Yeah.
I get. If you think it's cheating, the next question is, did you enjoy the show? Did it sound good?
And it's like at this point with metal, there's so much about like, oh yeah, they don't, triggers are lame. Don't do this. Clicks are lame. It's like, but metal, I want to say, and I can't even remember who I read it by, but it's like the modern metal drum sound in particular. It's like it isn't like not attainable by regular mixing techniques. So there's a point where it's like, look, this is a silly genre where we're going a million miles an hour and we've got 8,000 people screaming at the top of their lungs. It's like, in order to make everything cut through, in order to make everything sound good, it's like you need some assistance.
Yeah, I really think if you can't tell a certain tool is being used, people don't care.
Right.
And I think that's how a lot of it has to be implemented. Or no, that's how a lot of it has been implemented. But then when someone sees something,
yeah,
that's when they suddenly take offense. Like I said, it'd be another episode. So, but amp sims, they're like, that sounds great. What kind of amp are you using? It's like, I'm using a Moore MIDI 009. Oh,
yeah. Oh, dude, when I was first writing music, I remember I had a Amplitube.
That's software, right?
Yeah. So it was just, this was like way back in the day when I was just like, had a guitar in my bedroom and was just messing around. But I remember one guy I used to post on a death metal message board, which is long since died, but I sent one of my songs or a few of my songs to a buddy of mine. He was like, dude, this is awesome. So he sent it to somebody else. He was like, and that guy was like, oh, the tone. I was like, man, I just used like the
preset,
Mesa Boogie rectifier on Amplitude and like cranked the gain up to where it sounded like shit. Because I didn't know what I was doing. But,
So you mentioned the Cymatic audio, what is it, the U-Track 24?
Yes.
So I don't know if you know this, but I have a Cymatic audio LP16.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the discount version. So I got it used. New that thing is $400, which is that surprised me. And then the U-Track is $550, by the way.
It wasn't when I bought it.
Right?
It was a lot. It was a lot more.
So it's come down to $550.
Yeah.
Yeah. The LP16. What I like about it is you just plug in a thumb drive. Mm-hmm. So you have your backing tracks. This will probably be. We'll come back to how you make them, but you have your backing tracks on a thumb drive, and you just jam it in the front, and then you can build a playlist.
Right.
Just kind of page through your songs as it goes. What I don't like about it is the outputs are all TRS. So that's
right.
If for those who don't know, the TRS looks like a guitar cable, but it's like a stereo looking guitar cable. So I have a giant snake hanging out of the back of this thing. It's kind of ridiculous because the LP16 is not mounted in a rack, so there is no way to make all the cabling tidy. You have this giant thick cable that at the end splits out into these 16. Actually, it's probably not 16. It's probably more like 12, maybe 8. Right. I'm not sure which cable snake I have. It's over there. But yeah, so that's always a pain. But the U-Track has XLR, does it not?
No, the U-Track actually is all TRS as well.
Well, I guess the benefit is rack mount, so you can wire everything in the back, and you don't have to deal with lugging around a giant snake.
Sorry, I actually have to look up a picture of this. It's not TRS. It's DB25. That's what it is.
That's right. So so what's that? That's the one that looks like a printer cable from the old days, right?
Yeah, it's a 25 pin. Yeah, and it's the same thing. It's just a 25 pin cable. So it's like so basically TRS and XLR. It's three. Like it's basically like three cables. It's like your tip. Your tip ring sleeve, right?
Yeah, TRS.
Yeah, and XLR is the same thing. Like you can convert between XLR and TRS, with no or minimal signal degradation. It's not like when you go from like a guitar cable to a or like
you don't have to change impedances.
Yeah. It's basically you switch between them. So DB25 is 25 pins, so it's just like every 3 pins is a signal.
A channel.
Yeah. So you can get 8, I believe, you can get 8 channels out of that. If you're going for, I think you probably have to go for TRS or XLR, but there's lots of DB25 to TRS breakout cables and TRS to XLR breakout cables.
I'm sure they're all very affordable.
So the Seismic Audio one on Amazon works plenty fine for me, and it does not cost $1 billion. Now, so interesting that you say about the LP16. The LP16 is almost preferable to me in terms of form factor, right? Like I'd almost prefer to have the thing on my pedal board or like near me, as opposed to in a rack, so I could screw with it without having to one of the annoying things that has arisen due to this backing track scenario is that I can't really freely wander the stage. It's gotten better now that I can rely on it a little bit more, but I more or less have to be near the rack. Because if something goes wrong, I need to be able to do something. So it's gotten to the point where I can kind of wander a little bit more, and not that I'm that good at that anyway, but I can kind of get away from the rack a bit. So because I could pretty much rely on the fact that it's going to do what it's been doing for the past like 3 or 4 years or however long we've had it now. But especially in like early days and former iterations of the rack, I couldn't really wander from it. And having the LP16 just like out on the pedal board or like just mounted to
get down and mash on some buttons.
Yeah, it would be way preferable. It would be way better for me, except for the fact that it's 16 freaking TRS cables, which I have no desire to mess with on stage. But I've often thought about what you could do to fix that. You could. So as full disclosure, I always advocate for like way overkill when it comes to technical solutions to these sorts of things. So I'm about to advocate for one. So, okay, you can get a MADI AD converter, and then you can have one cable.
Is that like the Ethernet thing?
So MADI is one. Actually, the MADI connector is unique, I believe.
But it's the same idea. It's a bunch of A to D.
Yeah,
analog to digital converters, and then it's just sent through one cable, and then I'm guessing on the other side you have a digital to analog converter.
Yes. Now the problem is that AD converters and DA converters like this cost way too much money. It's not something that you'd want on your pedal board.
Right.
But it would be a way of getting around having to route a billion TRS cables everywhere. The second thing that you could do, which would be a little bit more roadworthy, but probably wouldn't really work either, would be having a multi-pin connector, which is one of the things that we did for ISENMOR. Actually,
that's another episode.
That's an entirely other episode. But you could get around it that way, which would be cool. But yeah, so actually to flip back a little bit, I guess to the topic of the episode. I
lost track of what that was.
Yeah, me too. With after ISENMOR had its backing track and its click situation figured out, we played one or two more shows with RBG where we used like the old brain, just because we hadn't done the work needed to get all of the tracks into the new setup, and they did not go. I know one of them was the aforementioned one where the computer needed to update in the middle of the fucking show. So eventually we actually got everything going to the new rack with our new way of playing backing tracks, and in my opinion, it's made our shows better. It's at least made them a little bit more consistent or predictable. Let's put it that way. We still have RVG always has its fair share of technical problems. But I feel like they're a little bit more like at the connecting the guitar to the amp level as opposed to the backing track level, which is kind of nice. So yeah, I feel like we're fairly happy where we're at now in terms of how we're playing.
I do have plans for the future for how to better use the backing tracks, and that is automation. Mm-hmm. Which we briefly attempted to do, and then it wasn't working. But if you have a MIDI controllable amp sim like all of us, well, I do.
Yeah, I do too.
Do all of us? Yeah, in ISENMOR, everyone does. No, no. Pete still uses an amp, like some sort of Luddite.
Well, he can just get a MIDI relay. MIDI to amp.
For me, there's it's timed playback, so you could and both of the backing track players we mentioned support MIDI, so you just load up your MIDI file with all your patch changes, and then you don't have to do anything anymore. If you and I think it would be particularly good for RVG because for example, the Sunken Road, there's parts where you have to switch from the rhythm patch to the clean patch to the solo patch. And by you, I mean me. Like, I have to do that within something like 3 measures.
Right.
And I'm tap dancing, and I don't think I've ever gotten it smoothly. So for RVG, look out for that. If there are ever shows again,
Right.
hopefully I'll be far away from my pedal board and everything's just going to change itself. And if you didn't think we were cheating when we started, you will by the time we're done. So
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
we have the player has the capability. I think we're running into like one of the issues with the player where the MIDI playback is something else, but it should just work.
So let's say you don't want to drop hundreds of dollars. Someone out there wants to start doing backing tracks. I was trying to think of alternatives to this very expensive hardware. And I go back to get some shit MP3 player and
a Y splitter.
Get a Y splitter. And
that's what I do.
When you mix down your backing tracks, you put everything on one side and the click on the other. Have your drummer play to the click. No one else will be able to hear it. Unless you have an in-ear rig, but if you're cheaping out on backing tracks, you're probably not going to have an in-ear rig.
Well, you can conceivably get one of those Audio Galaxy in-ear monitors because those things are not expensive.
Yeah, relative to everything else.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, but you can get a budget in-ear. Like if all you give a shit about is click, like you just have like a one earpiece in that just has your click so you can hear the rest of the stage noise. Yeah, I would definitely MP3 player Y.
Yeah, and then you can start songs just like Winter Sun.
That would be plenty.
Another thing you could do is just a laptop with an audio interface. But I think the problem there is if you need more than 2 tracks, I feel like the price for audio interfaces shoots up.
Yeah, I mean the Motu Ultralight is $500 somewhere in there, and it might be a little bit more than that, but you get like 12 tracks out of that, and so that's actually not a bad deal for if you need like a ton of tracks. But you can also just get like a Focusrite or hell like a Behringer Euphoria for like $100 or something like that, and those are great. Well, at least I don't know. I don't know anything about the Behringer. The Focusrites are great. So if you just have a laptop and the Focusrite, you can do the same thing, and then you just get like Reaper.
Yeah. So you can cheat on a budget. You don't have to shell out for all the expensive hardware.
And to be totally honest with you, if you wanted to minimize your rig as much as possible, it probably looks more like a laptop with a Focusrite.
Yeah, I guess it also depends how much you need on your backing tracks. Like, do you need separate outputs for everything? Like, if you have drums on a backing track, for example, do you need one channel for all of your drums? Or would you do what a sound guy would like you to do and give a kick, a snare, both separately, toms, and then overheads, or, a proper drum mix? I guess it all depends on use case. So, if anyone has questions, drop me a line. I'm the person to ask because I'm just going to ask Mike.
Frankly, if I could get away with, if I trusted a laptop a little bit more in a live situation, I think it'd be the way to go. And if I had like a crew that could manage it for me when I'm gigging, or like when I'm actually playing, that would be fine too. But if you're like some homegrown, I mean, not that what I've done with our rack is particularly attainable to most because I have a problem. But if you're just you have no roadies, you're just playing, you're setting up your own gear and you're gigging and you're playing and you're trying to sound awesome, I would definitely go more towards the hardware end as opposed to the laptop end. So I mean, in that case, the MP3 player plus Y splitter.
And if you do go the laptop route, make sure you update your Windows before you go on stage. You don't want it happening when the show starts.
Now, one thing I will say that I have not looked much into is using an iPad to drive, because there are multi-channel audio playback capabilities or apps in iPad, and some of them can actually interact with legit audio interfaces. The last I checked, the Android can't do the low latency audio as much, so Android's not as viable. But perhaps you might be able to do it with an iPad.
Yeah, but how many U-Track 24s can you buy for the same price as an iPad?
Probably
it's at least
it's probably a 1-to-1. But then you need the audio interface on top of it. So
so if you want to do the set your money on fire option, go with the iPad.
There you go.
All right, well, I think that about does it for now, at least. We can call everything part 1.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I could definitely keep going if you let me.
Well, so if anyone has made it this far, thank you very much. Be sure to check out ISENMOR. That's ISENMOR. ISENMOR.com, Facebook.com/ISENMOR. Check out Recently Vacated Graves at zombiemetal.com. That one's easier. And follow us on Bandcamp. Buy the stuff so we can buy more multi-track backing track players.
Oh yeah, at this point I'm just trying to slim it down. I just want the same stuff I have, just smaller. So yeah, we need more money for that.
Thanks for listening to Podcast Them Down. You can find Burning Shadows, ISENMOR, and Recently Vacated Graves on Bandcamp, as well as Facebook, along with Fade to Black Metallica Tribute and Podcast Them Down itself. Until next time, keep it metal.